Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded July 13th, 2022. Good afternoon / evening, Rod, Brody, Franklin. How you guys doing?
Howdy.
Doing good.
Feeling pretty good.
Feeling good. People are going to have to actually watch the Twitch stream to see the hats and sunglasses that you guys are wearing to understand what's going on here, why I'm not even participating in the video.
All right, Frank, I'll be normal. You and I.
Oh my God, he's just a buzzkill.
No, go ahead, keep it on. I'm just saying.
No, I don't want it on that. Yeah, he's shamed me now.
All right.
I have a reason. This is the Calgary Stampede week. Happy Stampede, everybody.
Happy Canadian version of cow punching. There you go.
Cow punching.
It is a week and a half long event, and everybody's partying downtown. No one's getting any real work done downtown. There's tents everywhere, beer gardens, events, rodeos, concerts. I think Offspring's playing tonight. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Right, and everybody has skipped work to do that probably while there's hiring freezes and layoffs.
It's a gong show. Like everybody's in jeans and cowboy gear downtown, and there's police everywhere looking for people who've just been drinking all day. And I had a cop roll up beside me, and he was just checking me out to see if I had like a seatbelt on and I wasn't intoxicated. While I was just went downtown to get a haircut. I'm like, hi, it's just a huge party. It's just a huge party downtown right now, and there's breakfasts everywhere, pancake breakfasts, like all kinds of companies put them on, and so I got some pancakes and some sausages today. It was great. It's a good time. We went out on the weekend. We're hosting a party on Friday. My lovely wife's getting everything together, and I'm doing the man stuff / cleaning. And there you go. It's good.
Brody, I want to tell you, since you started asking gardening questions in our Discord, I set up a specific channel for gardening just for you.
Really? We could mean it's off topic. Like it's why I put it in general, just something that's off topic. But that's fine. Yes, everybody listening, I inherited a beautiful garden when we bought this house, and some of the plants are like very mature delphiniums, and aphids are my bane of existence.
Really?
Ever since I started gardening. Yeah, I started gardening in Banff, and it was a greenhouse, and aphids got in, and I used to grow hot peppers, which are very sensitive and take a long time. It's like 120 days to maturity. And so I have done things like buying a bag of live ladybugs from Costco and releasing them in the greenhouse over the course of a few nights to naturally defeat the aphids. That's not a good option when it's outside. And they eat them, and then they lay eggs, and their larvae come out, and they're like, "Oh, it's party time."
I think I'm uncomfortable with this discussion. It's a lot of egg laying.
Well, me playing an entomologist on TV. This is inside the greenhouse. Are there any ants around? Any visible trail? Any signs of ants?
Well, so now I have a backyard garden, and yes, there are ants, and unfortunately, the ants, as I've learned, protect the aphids because the aphids produce all of this wonderful honeydew. But you know what the problem is? Like I planted new ones. I planted new delphiniums. My dad actually brought them over from our grandma's property. And he brought them all the way to Alberta. He drove them out here, and I planted them. All the new plants we planted are doing well. It's just these very mature delphiniums, and I've learned that aphids love plants that are stressed out. And I think what I need to do next year is thin these big like bundles of delphiniums. I need to thin them out because I think they're stressed and they're overcrowded.
Just sing to them.
I will.
That'll definitely kill them.
Country song.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Edward. Have you ever heard me sing before? It's kind of rude.
Yeah, your singing is rude. That's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you admit it. See, admitting is the first step in,
It is. It is. Thank you.
Nah, I just kidding.
I know. Oh, you're kidding? Weird.
Yeah, I'm kidding. So, our guest to be on for everybody. But
Yep.
other than Brody not doing anything this week and telling everybody he's not working, Franklin, what did you do this week?
Well, I would like to congratulate 3 of the 4 of us on passing the SC100s.
Oh, yeah. Hey, there's a yeehaw. Come on, Brody.
Yeehaw.
There you go.
Congrats, gentlemen.
So let's ask our listeners. Take a guess who didn't pass.
Oh, you mean who didn't write it?
I know.
Who didn't write it. Yeah, there you go.
Well, evidently Frank didn't write it either because I passed. So they had some real exam questioners and people on the JTA.
It's not a valid test.
It is a valid.
The credibility has gone down since you passed on the first attempt.
It happened. Hey, I was surprised. I like, whatever. Then I saw somebody post there. I was like, man, I wonder if I pass. And the crazy part about it, you'll see that you probably noticed this. It'll say that your certification is valid from June 30th to June 30th of next year, but it says that you passed the exam like in April. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm like, I don't remember taking it in April, but I guess I did because I wanted to beat the beta deadline. Yeah. But I took a screenshot before Frank does whatever he does, and all of my certification history goes away again. And
LinkedIn blew up. Like everybody who took it and passed, like there must have been 15 to 20 people on the same day that all posted their badge. Like, oh, I passed. It's like, oh yeah, this must be the
You
day.
can't get the badge yet, so they're still getting the badges out. So it's just their like certificate or whatever.
Right,
I've seen some people that have struggled with the test, and they've been very strong like SC200, but they were not strong on the Azure side. So I'd have to say that if you're going to go take the test and you've passed SC200, go read the learn content for AZ500 and AZ700 and get to know the technology there and do those labs that are behind it or understand what they're supposed to do. Because remember, this test is not about pressing buttons to do a thing. It's about advising what should be done. So it's very important. So that's where I've seen, obviously we hang out with the SC200 people quite a bit, and that's where I've seen them struggle. So even if you're doing the AZ500, it's still important for you to go over AZ700 in detail because of how much depth that exam and content provides.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt good about the exam because I thought it played to, and plus it was beta. As long as you got reasonably close, I'm sure you passed, right? But it gave scenarios that we talk about on the show, like if you do this way, or if you have this way, or if your customer has something this way. I think our experience of either talking about it, asking questions about it, a combination of having our guests come on and talk about their skill set. But it also reminds me of something too. I had a customer that actually, I guess, felt pity on me a little bit because they like, I can't imagine you happen to be a so-called expert across this whole thing. He said, I only have to do one thing in my job. And that consumes my whole, my mind share. And he said, how do you guys
stay broad, but still deep?
And I said, we don't. We show up to the fire with the extinguisher based on what the fire is. Chemical fire, foam. I need to snuff out a fire, halogen. So you can't keep everything on the ready, right? And I think I gave the analogy that even Batman has a limited amount of stuff on his utility belt. He can't carry everything, right? So you learn
it's the movies. Come on.
Yeah, you learn what to carry in your utility belt, right? I'm carrying some things I'm going to drop, but you know what? Go ahead, Franklin.
Before we bring in our guest, I do want to bring up what we were talking about before we went live, which I think is important because Brody actually said some really good stuff and what he was saying about what is required, because there's a lot of hiring freezes going on, a lot of layoffs going on. And Brody had some really good advice. I said, hey, we should really talk about this in here. And I'm sure you won't remember what he said, but what advice would you give people out there in their positions that are worried about the pending layoffs and freezes and everything else? Because you had really good words for that.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the first compliment you've ever given me, Franklin. So I appreciate that. But seriously, across the industry, I think it's important that folks who work in security, technology security, et cetera, stay competitive, consistently upskill their abilities through certifications or self-learning, have a dedicated lab that they can use to whatever. It doesn't even have to be Microsoft technology, any technology, is keeping abreast of what the technology does, being very intimate with it is important. Networking also, I think, is almost more important in my opinion than skill development. Not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. Especially since joining Microsoft, I've expanded my network significantly. And if there's ever reorgs in any organization, but you have people who know you and can trust that you're going to kill it week in, day out, maybe that's an opportunity for you to shuffle over somewhere else. I'm thinking about my future lately with the news in the industry and how I can stay competitive. And while I'm a 365 focused security career so far, both at a partner and now at Microsoft, I was really listening to when we had Nick in the Nick of Time on recently. He was the previous chief software officer for the Department of Defense and the Air Force.
Yep.
Maybe it's time I need to take a look at containerization security closer. Maybe it's time I need to take a look at secure software development lifecycle security. And I don't have a big application background, but Defender for IoT was another thing he brought up, or securing IoT devices broadly. So while I think there's a lot of areas right now in threat protection and compliance / information protection or data loss prevention that are top of mind for a lot of customers I work with, and there's significant amounts of work, I don't want to be ignorant to infrastructure as code capabilities and containerization capabilities down the road. So if I stay in a very technical role, that's an area I'm going to be looking into. I like to get into more of a higher level architect position at one point in my career. But yeah, I think he said it best. I think you have to keep reinventing yourself. And when he said that, it really struck me because I reinvented myself in order to eventually get to Microsoft. I had a very large on-prem infrastructure and collaboration background or productivity background. And one day, an amazing manager of mine at a previous role, he said, if you want to get into security, why don't you look into getting your CISSP? And that's what got me, moving into actually being a full security professional. And it's been great. It's been fantastic, but I can't get complacent because and I've seen it with people in the industry where they know the thing, maybe that's name your technology, and it slowly starts petering away, like on-prem technology. And then like that's the thing they've been working on for 10 years, 15 years. And like, nope, that's my thing. I don't need to reskill in anything else. I am the subject matter expert in this. Well, this will disappear one day and it will evolve into something new. And if you don't get ahead of that, you might be in a tough position one day. So I hope that was helpful to everybody listening.
It is. I agree with you 100%. But I think what Frank was wanting you to reiterate is something that you said that was super important. Plus, I have two other perspectives on it. The most important thing you said is that if someone takes time out of their schedule to mentor you and to share their experiences, to share their pitfalls, to give you their time, and you don't do all the other things you talked about, networking, improving your skills. I've said on this show, I learn more when I'm not working than when I am working. Right. And you're talking about the technology, those who want to be a subject matter expert, as though that's going to, shield them against potential, employment disruption. Well, I gave a scenario to some of the college kids I mentor, and I'm like, think of your career as a herd of antelope. Okay. You don't want to be the fastest because you may run into something, right? And realize I put too much effort into this, and this is not really either I have a passion for, or it's not going to be something that's sustainable. You don't want to be the dragger who's going to sit here and wait it out. You want to be in the middle of the pack. And so there's no way you can learn all of this stuff, but I agree with you. I'm starting to get more into the purely Azure security workloads outside the stuff that I do.
I found myself going through a complete book of TypeScript, right? I don't forget why I read through the book and went through the thing. So you got to do these things. And so that was number 2. And number 3, my mentor told me a long time ago, she said, Edward, your job will kill your career. And it took me a minute. She's a senior vice president, retired at started when it was Bell South, his AT&T. But and I didn't understand. And then when I went back, I said, I guess I can say she's retired. Joanne, what are you talking about? She said, your job is only concerned about what is necessary for you to know to do your job to the benefit of them. They're not always in your best interest around your career. And I've seen that early in my career when I've gone in and told, some managers or VPs I report to, hey, I want to learn this. Why do you do that? And now employers are always trying to tell you, hey, we want you to have professional growth, but in the meantime, you still need to know how to do this, right? But
sure.
Somebody said, when someone gets a new job, they say, what's the first thing? I always ask this question. What's the first thing you should do after you land a new gig? Start looking for the next one. You need to start prepping now, right? I'm just reiterating an old saying, prepare yourself for where you want to be later on, right?
Dress for the job you want. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have, right?
Yeah. You got to. And I've had this same I've been in a family show, Ed. I was about to say something. I've been in a crappy mood, man, since I got back from Greece. It seems like I have no purpose. I'm just stuff, right? And but no, I'm trying to double down. I had a couple of friends that have gotten laid off or been, riffed or whatever they call it. And one of them is at AWS, one's at Microsoft, and another buddy of mine is thinking that his job over at VMware is about to do it.
Yeah, that's some bad news right there. I was watching that news yesterday. The guy that they put in charge of VMware when Broadcom bought him, he left.
Yeah, he's just like unveiling. But the crazy part about it is that it's the tech companies I'm hearing. The consumers of tech seem like they're rallying their forces to do what's necessary to protect against attrition. And then you also have employers that believe that now they have the upper hand because one guy he had to call the bluff of his director, who was going to demand that he come into the office 3 times a week. And he said, oh, okay, I totally understand what you guys are trying to do right here. Here's my 2 weeks notice. He called his bluff, right? But his skill set is so high that he could actually go in and get hired and displace 2 people. He's just good, right? So
that may be for now, though. So you kind of have to look ahead just a little bit with the economy and everything the way that's going now. Even those people are going to have difficulty in the future.
Fair.
Yeah, luckily, and I'll give kudos out to our co-host, and he sort of mentored me around understanding global economics and macroeconomics, and that's Franklin Grimberg on this show. Because of him, almost a year and a half ago, I really delved down and quit watching the news. It's sensationalism. You need to go see experts and understand. And I started grooving my behavior, both in finances, where I spend my time technically, and how I do my job. Because whatever Frank said it came. We knew this was coming, right? And so I would say to those who are, this is not a time to be a worry wart, and because I got laid off at a job when I was billing at 142% at a partner.
Wow. I mean, you were doing everything you could. It sounds like. I mean, that's a big UTIL number. Yeah.
Their future was not my skill set at the time. Get rid of Ed, get someone else, because this is where we want to be. And that arrogance in my skill set long time ago taught me no one is layoff proof unless you own your own company.
What were you a subject matter experts in Lotus Notes or something, Edward? What was
I think it was aphids.
it was APHIS, right?
So one of the things that I think that a lot of our listeners have seen by the people that went out, we brought them on. They got jobs and opportunities because of the actions that they took to make things happen for themselves. And so from the tech side, from the finance side, from everything, they made it happen. And so you just constantly have to be investing in yourself, not only in tech, but all parts of your life to move it forward. But we do have a guest here, so
we'll go ahead and get started. I would ask what Rod was doing all week, but he hasn't been doing anything other than bothering me about zero trust. But good on that. And then some more stuff I'll send to you, Rod. Right. So we do have a guest on. We have Mr. Drew Nicholas, and he is probably one of the most well-rounded individuals, not just from his knowledge, but because of the roles he's held at Microsoft. Drew's original, when I knew of him, he was at Dart. Then he joined the GBB team. Oh, actually, he didn't join the GBB team. He transformed into a security seller, was an ESE. Then he became a GVB. So his breadth of knowledge about the entire customer engagement lifecycle is it's not matched by many people. So he's had to come in when things were bad to help you out. He's had to come in and advise and sell you stuff to make sure nothing bad is happening to you. And now he's a GBB and he realized he has no power. He's just here now. So with that, Drew, thank you for taking time. I know we had a little bit of a scheduling faux pas. You're traveling, you're doing the good work, but I may not have done justice to your introduction. So please come on, introduce yourself, and then just talk about what's on the top of your mind today, sir.
No worries. Yeah, and actually, I think it's Brody. I think you were calling out like the DevSecOps. I'll get to that in just a second. That's actually my current passion. But as Edward mentioned, I've been at Microsoft for quite a while. I started as part of our MCS Microsoft Consulting Services back in 2015. I was part of a group called America's Cloud Service Team, and we were focused at the time of getting customers moved to Office 365. But I had the greatest resource manager there was at the time, and she gave me a lot of ability to work holistically. So I actually started working on both Azure and Office 365, moving customers to both of those with security and governance in mind. So doing things like making sure proper configuration of Azure AD, making sure logging's enabled, making sure all of the right security controls were on from both modern workplace, what we call on the Azure side. Did that for about 3 years. And we started seeing a lot of identity compromises in the cloud. And so basically not having multi-factor on, maybe GAs with easy passwords. And so the Dart team, Dan Taylor, one of the best people in the world, he's now the lead at Dart. He asked me to help on a couple of engagements on customers, basically pull logs, figure out how the adversaries compromised and what they did when they did. After a couple of those of helping out, I actually moved over to Dart and helped create our Office 365 incident response. So looking at how adversaries got in, what they did after, so things like mailbox rules, how they exfiltrated data. Spent about 2+ years of doing that. It was incredible, but it's definitely taxing because you get called in at the worst times for customers. And so moved into the security specialist, the ESE role. And I loved it at the time because it was 50-50. I got to do very architectural focus. And the sales side. So understanding the business problems and how to actually help the business. Moved into the GBB role, kind of focused. I've done the XDR side, but I'm really big right now in the DevSecOps. So the whole shift left mentality. So how do we get with the develop? That's actually where I've been at for the last 2 days. Is on site with a customer, walking through how are we going to get the developers from the time that they're writing their source code to make sure that there's no dependencies. If you looked at like some of the biggest breaches, there's Apache Struts was a huge issue back in 2019. It was just source code that allowed for remote execution. But I think when you mentioned like the infrastructure as code, a lot of the adversaries are now, if they can get in, they can manipulate your IAC, whether it's like via Terraform or however you're pushing it up. They can actually push misconfigured code to the cloud And then with all of our customers really moving to containers and Kubernetes, how do we make sure, because we can't put agents on these things, so how do we make sure these short-lived services are clean when they get checked in, and how do we make sure? So the DevSecOps area right now is probably my favorite. When I jumped on, I kind of heard y'all talking about that. So that's a little background about me.
Appreciate that.
So I know who to go to for CI/CD stuff and DevSecOps, and for you to talk about that, you're probably the third person we've had on that said, hey, this is part of the thing that is going to be the future of security, is where security individuals are going to have to learn a little bit more about the business of developing, writing product, and the product people are going to have to learn a little bit more about security, that you can't secure it after you're done, right? And I think a lot of times security took a hit because people were super emphasizing on productivity and efficiency. Think waterfall, agile, scrum. The section on any of those frameworks about security is about that little bitty. It's nothing, right? Because they want it out, right? I saw someone sent me a meme that said the rollover PM, to hell with security, meet the deadline. You know, and that's our project managers think. Yeah, that's all good. This needs to be released, right? So out of the 3 roles that I knew of you, Nicholas, I'm sorry, Drew, I call him by his last name. Which of the roles do you find, and I can't say that's the absolute most fulfilling, challenging, whatever, because you've been in, like I said, the detection and response team. You've been a security seller selling, you know, the Azure security workloads as well as M365, and now you're a GBB, which is, who knows what that role really does, right? Which other roles so far are you most excited about, or what you were excited about, you know?
So this is kind of like asking me which of my children I love. I don't have children, but if I did, which of my children I love most. They all have different reasons that I love them. For example, like from the Dart side, I mean, when you get there, I was in Dubai, had a customer that was, you know, a $10 billion company. They were completely shut down. They couldn't manufacture. They couldn't process payments. So this company was like legitimately losing $20 million a day. And you just you get there and you see just how much damage these adversaries have done. And it's heartbreaking. And my job was to get them back up running, figure out how it happened, get it remediated, and get them at least enough that they can do business. And so that whole, I actually was interviewed one time and I made a joke. You literally see the 5 stages of grief. And I mean, there's denial, there's anger, but when you get them past that to the acceptance stage and they're back up and running, it was very good for me personally. That was very fulfilling. But I love the GBB and the ESE role for similar, but basically helping customers not have to call the Dart team, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so understanding those misconfigurations, and I love the teaching part of it. So we can figure out, you kind of mentioned DevSecOps, me and a couple of the product group team members are writing an article right now called Securing the CI/CD. And a lot of security people, to your point, haven't been in this shift left mentality. It's very new. And so the ability to teach and help, that's also very fulfilling. And I love the GBB role because we get to play with the new toys. So I don't know if that answers your questions at all.
It does. It's just trying to figure out where your swim lanes are, what you want to be passionate about, what you want to spend your energy on, right? Because everybody on this call can learn anything if they have the enthusiasm and they have the time. We just have the innate competency to say, hey, if I need to go learn this, I could. It's just do you want to learn it, right? So, you know, I forgive me for not remember, but I do believe that you cover a vertical that is super challenging. Remind me, is that EDU education or is it healthcare?
So I cover EDU, and it's a very interesting vertical because we don't think about how much potential damage can be done with being EDU. You don't really think of these as customers as targets. But if you start thinking about like a lot of these universities and who they're doing research with, I mean, many of these top universities are doing research with three-letter agencies and things that are like very classified. So they're targets more for like supply chain attacks and adversaries getting through a university account to compromise research that they're doing with these other ones. And they're also, you think about it, EDU is also very interesting because these colleges are also responsible for things like the dorms. So we talk about like OT technology, there's like Modbus and all these interesting protocols because they have this weird facet of like what things that they have and like the dorm buildings and making sure that those protocols are secure. But then you also have the piece that like, then you have to secure these students and teachers who have, you know, tenure and they might not want to turn on MFA or they might not want to do that. There's a lot of interesting pieces to the education space and it's, and unfortunately it's, I know we're talking about tuition being through the roof. Just like almost all of our customers, there is definitely budgetary issues in the EDU space. And because there's just so many of these identities you think about, I mean, some of these major colleges have, you know, 50,000 students and then 10,000 more faculty and staff, and then all of the research partners. And so it starts snowballing very quickly.
Yeah, I would have to validate your thing around colleges and universities and such. You know, I used to cover EDU, and you know, it was higher ed, but the unfettered access of sometimes these universities, because learning it shouldn't be bound, but I can't mention the Ivy League school. They were wide open. And the bandwidth that they had was better than some major companies and ISPs. And like you're a prime place to go launch and attack from. You got to be a little bit more diligent in it. But EDU is always going to be a struggle because everything that's bad about being able to protect yourself, they can't necessarily pay the right salaries or the appropriate salaries to be competitive. They can't necessarily find a skill set. A lot of times, if you associate it to a educational entity as an employee for security, a lot of times you're locked into the geographic location. This is pre-pandemic because everybody works remote now, right? But that it's a labor of love because they need it. I see K through 12. I give EDU this. They made everybody understand and update their security or operational awareness because they had to quickly pivot more than anybody else to go remote for these students. You know,
Good point.
So you got to admire. They now you happen to get laptops out. Now you happen to protect your environment because your son is using mommy or daddy's laptop to be able to do his lessons. There's no telling what mommy or daddy's been watching on their laptop, right? And what's on there, right? So you got all these things.
AFID videos.
Yeah, AFID videos, right? That's the new thing, AFID videos. Drew, you've helped me out several times. You've done this stuff. Let me ask a question of you. You and I deal in threat protection and advanced hunting and everything. I didn't get a sense. How important was KQL learning for you to be able to do what you do? And how important is it now with your CI/CD stuff?
I mean, so I'm very fortunate. Like I was like a SQL admin, so I understand like just query language in general. It's a different query language, and honestly, so when I was MCS back in 2015, this was way before it was called Log Analytics. It actually used to be called Operational Insights. This was like before it was even Operations Management Suite, the underlying data repository. Is when I started learning KQL. And so I was very fortunate because of my Azure monitoring and governance and using things like App Insights. I've been using KQL for, 7 years now. And so the learning curve was not at all difficult to me because I learned it as it came out. But I see a lot of challenge for customers that, they might be coming from a Splunk language or a QRadar language trying to learn KQL. And there's a learning curve, but I think we at Microsoft, we try to do make it as intuitive as possible, where you can tab it out and it does the updates for you and predictive analytics. But when you're talking about the CI/CD stuff, there's so from a response side, absolutely. And so we like to break it down into protect, detect, and respond. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like important from the protect side, because it's all about the cloud security posture management. It's all around vulnerability findings, checking it, validating what you're using is proper. But as you start moving to that detect side, so things that have actually happened, that's where it becomes vital. And just understand it, because, so for example, Log4j vulnerability last year, if I wanted to quickly pull back all of my different web apps or server or web servers that might have that vulnerability, having the ability to quickly do a KQL query, you have it almost instantly versus trying to go and find it without something like that. And then from the Dart side, that's pretty much all I did was for 2 years, just did KQL queries, put everything into a log analytics repo, and had fun.
Yeah. Yep. I learned it the bad way, and I have to go back and relearn it. Big shout out to Rod Trent for Must Learn KQL and all the contributors to it and his blog. But unlearning.
Shout out Rod Trent, friend of the show. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you guys don't know him, you need to follow him. The Cloud and Data AI blog by Mr. Rod Trent. Hey.
It's like I'm not even here.
AKA Speaker 25.
Speaker 25. Speaker 25. There you go. So, we were talking about the current industry and how the technical, let's not just say security, but if you work in information technology, within the last 2 years, maybe 3, you were sort of super buffered because your skill set, your scarcity was hugely needed. But now we're starting to see layoffs, and it seems like the start of this is technology companies, not consumers of technology. So my question to you, Drew, is, do you have any advice around that? What do you have any concerns or anything about what is coming down the road as far as the ability to ply your trade of a sort?
So that's I just love like tinkering with stuff. So that's one of the reasons that I'm starting to get so deep into the DevSecOps. But not even just this go around. I mean, if you look at it just in general, technology is like dying a lot faster than it did historically. So we're just moving on to new things much quicker. And I had a mentor years ago tell me, Drew, if you can do anything, gravitate to the newest thing, because it's super easy being a subject matter expert when no one else knows what's going on.
That's perfect, Drew. That is absolutely perfect.
Yeah. I mean, if no one else knows it, then that's the stuff that I've always gravitated to. And it's, right, for me, by gravitating to the newest thing, I feel like you're setting yourself up for success. And like, if no one else knows how to do it, I'm not saying you're indefensible, but it helps from a job security standpoint significantly, I think.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, as someone in a consulting role right now, that's just fantastic advice, Drew. And with, I almost think cloud agile development has made things a bit easier in the sense that you don't need to, version 7 of X solution. You need to know this version. Well, things are always changing week over week, day over day, month over month. And there's no one person has all of the information. If you just try your best to stay on top of it and to build trust with customers you're working with, clients, whomever, and just keeping one step ahead, keeping abreast of what's going on, it's kind of fun. It's kind of organized chaos. It's fun, right? And you're never going to be completely caught up. And if you accept that and you advise those you serve that, hey, I might not have the answer today, but I can get it for you soon. I can follow up with you. Let me look into that. Everybody, we're all in the same boat. It's just a constantly shifting environment. It's fast moving. There's changes all the time. It's fun chaos to work in.
It
oh,
is.
Yeah, it is. I was gonna say the one struggle though, when you're trying to be the expert of things that no one else knows how to do, you do have to have a figure it out yourself mentality because there's no one else to ask.
Great
So
call.
so if you have that mindset and you like to figure things out, sorry, Edward, I didn't mean to interrupt you though. Sorry, I just wanted to caveat that because.
Well, no, you didn't interrupt me. You said exactly what I was going to say, but let me ask you this question. So you made a comment that you can't be the expert of across all these things. It's just not possible. So what thing are you responsible for in your role, if you choose to talk about it, from a technology standpoint, you could do without? Like, I know I'm supposed to cover this, but I have no interest in this. Whether it be an Azure security workload that you cover as a security GBB or M365 security workload, which one you're like, I'm not going to waste my time on that? Not because it's not important, but because maybe it is becoming so mainstream or commoditized that it doesn't land to say, I'm an expert at this. Which technology? I'll make it even easier for you.
Oh, I actually don't. You don't even have to make it easy because it actually happened to me yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I got brought into a call for a very large customer. It was supposed to be around cloud security. And as soon as I get there, I'm thinking it's all around like Azure security. They wanted to talk, and it's not that I don't like the product. I want to caveat this. It's just been so long. They were like, we want to talk about Defender for Office. And
a classic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I tried to go as much, but to be fair, I just haven't touched it in 5 or 6 years. And it's just, I mean, to be fair, Gardner doesn't even do like security mode gateway anymore because they say that industry is so mainstream. There's no difference between the vendors.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe commoditized is not the word, but it's been so long and it's no longer incubated product. It's no longer front running product. It's just been around, and the competition is so mature. So why waste time on it? Mimecast is still a player. Proofpoint's still a player. EOP. I come from a messaging background, but you're right. For me, I probably have to say the same thing. Yeah. I don't want to talk about email security. This has been beaten to death.
I've had so much messaging and exchange in my life, like I'm just over it. But those listening where that's important to you, there's an analyzer tool, Orca, you can run against your environment for Defender for Office configuration. It's a much easier to configure and understand state than it ever has been as part of its transition to the M365 Defender portal. So yeah, it's not the sexiest topic anymore. It's still important. Messaging security, transport security, but Microsoft has a lot of embedded capability that can help you get going on it with like strict or lax policies. But yeah, I hear you, Drew. It's not if it ever comes up, I'm like, I'd rather work on something else. But if that's what we got to talk about today, it's what we got to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, we all know phishing still, like phishing and password sprays are the two most common vectors for adversaries to get a foothold. So it is absolutely important. And I will never say it's not important. I think it's one of the most important products that we have, but it's just something I haven't worked on in 5 years. And so I was caught a little off guard yesterday.
That's weird, Drew. It's weird you were told the call was going to be one thing, but then it was something else. That never happens in consulting or working with customers. Super weird. Good on you to pivot and think on your feet.
Yeah, I had yesterday I started doing, the WB frog. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Because I had hello, my ragtime gal. Because I came to the meeting, and what I was told in the meeting invite and talking to the seller was nothing the customer wanted to hear. And I can tell that they were about to chop me off at the legs. And I said, okay, let's pivot. Let you guys talk. Tell me what you're trying to do. And the call actually ended up being a very productive call. What they really wanted was a strategy and roadmap session. We're getting ready to invest. We already know this. Tell us where to put our energy in as we make this roll. We need some prioritization. And that goes back to when I was telling our listeners, if you want to sell security, you need three things: transparency, honesty, and trust. I'm sorry, transparency, honesty, and a sense of a partnership with a customer. If you're a security seller out there and you're listening, or you support a security seller, here's Ed's one piece of advice. You're not selling something to someone when it comes to security. You may be getting them to change their mind about how they go about their business, right? What they are going to invest their time in rather than what you believe is going to be a purchase, because you have to consider the other things. Is this going to be disruptive to my ability to maintain my employees who are so-called subject matter experts in a certain technology, and I'm telling them to change? And I think a lot of organizations don't use that as a measuring stick. How disruptive would this be for me to maintain, right? So Drew, what are you working on cool right now?
Yeah, good question. What do you got, Drew? What's cool?
To me, I've just been super excited around all of the source code security and container security. So like a lot of people don't realize, like GitHub Enterprise offers a tool called Advanced Security. And so Advanced Security has like 4 features, including things like the pin to bot. So it actually looks at your source code and it tells you, are you using any modules or that have vulnerable dependencies, like I mentioned, like the Apache struts. It also looks for things like, are you sharing secrets, like in plain text or in the code, or using some sort of thing like a key vault or a hashy vault. It looks for like, is your code susceptible to like SQL injection attacks? So it's really cool to like look at it from the source code and then start looking at it from as the source code, whether you're using things like GitHub Actions or like something like a Terraform or a Bicep, going into like, and then would send your code into a container registry, and then it starts doing things like vulnerability assessment there. Containers are one of these things that I also like having conversations with customers in areas that I'm actually filling a need for them. I was never the best seller on like taking out something that they currently have and replacing it. I was always good about finding areas that there were holes and showing how our tools can fill those holes and kind of meeting that piece.
Love it. Yeah. That's a good mindset too.
What does the Defender for Containers provide, and all of the Defender products provide around what you're doing?
Oh, Defender for Containers is like my heart right now. So it actually does, it's got the vulnerability assessment. So it's actually at the time of check-in, it'll actually do the vulnerability assessment. We partnered with Qualys, so it's looking for any vulnerable pieces on the container. So things like Debian updates. But December, we went private preview, we went public preview. And now we should be GA now, but we're actually in the pod. So we're doing it what's called a Defender extension within the container. Prior to this piece, we were only in the control plane. So it really limited the amount of visibility that we got for alerts from like a cloud workload protection piece. And so Defender for Containers does now the runtime protection. So it's looking for those alerts. And since it's actually in the pod, we're discovering some really cool things. Like, for example, if it's like an IP address from a Tor browser, if they try to do a host name escape. So it's becoming one of the, in my opinion, up there as one of the best containers, Kubernetes type security tools. And it was actually prior to the change, we had 2 tools called Defender for Container Registry and Defender for Kubernetes. It's those 2 with the profile extension. And what's really neat is we go on AWS's EKS. We also do GCP's GKE, and we do IaaS, or like if it's an on-prem Kubernetes instance as well. So I'm doing a ton of that right now. The other big thing it ties very closely with the container registry or the vulnerability assessment is around cloud security posture management. And so things like, how do I make sure if there is something misconfigured that the person is notified or that's automatically remediated Or how do I make sure that I actually know what's in my Azure estate with things called inventory. And we've got a really cool new feature that's out called governance, where you can actually, if a recommendation like a vulnerable image gets pushed into the repo, you can notify the resource owner that it needs to be remediated, and you can do it by a timeline. So that governance functionality is really cool from a CSPM. If y'all ever get a chance, to the listeners, I would highly recommend looking into what's called CNAP. It's the new, Gardner coined it, I believe, last year. It's Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. And it's kind of a mixture between cloud security posture management, cloud workload protection, KIEM. I learned the other day that I was completely mispronouncing KIEM, which is Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management. So for Microsoft, it's Entra Privilege Management. And so CNAP is all around those three workloads, and also like code security. So if you get a chance, there's a CNAP is a really cool area to look into.
When you say CNAP, what is it? Is it Charlie, November, Alpha, Papa?
Papa, two Papas.
Two Papas.
Cloud Native Application Protection Platform.
So just let people know they're taking the SC200. The cloud security posture management was actually not part of the skills measured to begin with. It is now in the skills measured. So you need to know more about configuring and working with these types of things. I don't write questions on that, but I know it's in the skills measured. So I assume those sort of questions should be coming up in SC200.
So you had a question? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Brody.
Oh yeah, no, I was just agreeing with Frank. I think that's important. You learn that regardless if it's on the exam or not. But yeah, I did have a question for Drew. So Drew, I may have missed it slightly in your introduction earlier, but as you heard when you joined, getting into DevOps or DevSecOps and container security is an interest of mine, and I'm sure other folks who are listening and or watching. How did you originally get into it? Driver, and what was your background or specialty immediately before? I'm really just curious about that transition. I know you said you had a SQL background. You want to expand on that more? I'm really curious how you got into it.
Oh yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I was in ESE, and I had no container Kubernetes background. I did a little bit of like MVC stuff back in like 2014. That was also around the same time that I was having my SQL experience. So what happened was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I had 3 customers and me all want to talk about DevSecOps. And so I spent 2 weeks, like basically a week straight, just watching YouTube videos, going on plural sites. And I had a friend of mine, Kendall Roden. She's now a product manager for the the new containerized application service. And I just kind of started picking her brain on what containers was, and then I just literally just started going on the Microsoft Docs. I'm like, how do you build a container? And there's some really cool. It took me a long time to understand what the difference between what Kubernetes and a container registry and what Docker and Docker Hub is. So just so you kind of understand, like Docker Hub and container registry are the kind of the management pieces of it. And so so when you think of containers, all the Kubernetes is just an orchestration system. So it allows you, it's basically telling the pods to spin up and spin down. So if I need to expand, it expands it. If I need to but it took me a lot of time to really understand what I was doing where from that. But as I started kind of building, I'm like, okay, so if you check in code, it's got to go like so you have to have an image in the container registry. So I started figuring out, I was like, okay, how do I get the image to the container registry? And that's where I started doing more stuff like around like the GitHub and the GitHub Actions. And then I started reading about vulnerabilities in like the Apache struts issue that I mentioned. You can look it up. That was one of the worst breaches in the U.S. history was because of that Apache Struts issue. And so that's really, once I started reading about massive companies that had been breached about the stuff, I realized the impact that it could have. And so I just kind of just did Pluralsight, did YouTube and stuff like that.
Cool. Thank you so much. I love that everything you just said, especially when you're like, I knew nothing about it. And then I took the initiative when I saw there was demand, and I skilled and educated myself. And then you worked with people working in the space. That's just fantastic, Drew. That's exactly what we all need to do consistently to keep ourselves current, right?
I think that Drew, I don't know your biological age. I don't know how long you've been in the game, but I think that lends to Rod and Franklin and myself. We're old heads. Our longevity and our ability to adapt to be able to go do it, right? And you got to do it. I think that folks that have sort of jumped into technology because it became so important with here in the last decade, a lot of them don't have battle scars. I've done many late night cutovers and stuff just broken and all that other stuff. So I think that a lot of perspective on coming up through the ranks is something that's been greatly diminished and undervalued. Because if you do have that experience, it sometimes allows you to see what's coming before someone who's relatively new to the industry. Now, whether you choose to pivot on it or just be a grouchy old man and say, I'm not gonna change, COBOL's gonna last. Well, COBOL's a bad example because it's still around. But you have some folks who just believe that Domino's Novell is just going to be around forever.
Yeah. Love it.
I was a CNE. I think I still hold that certification, by the way. But I just to kind of play on that for a minute. That is, and not everybody, it takes a little bit of time for people to kind of obtain that skill set. That's a mature approach to your profession, right? Being able to kind of identify what that next thing is and kind of be ready for it. I'll just admit I'm kind of at that juncture right now in the role that I'm in with the things that I cover, right? I've covered Microsoft Sentinel for the past 3.5 years, and I would consider that I probably know literally everything about it, but I feel that tug already, and I'm starting to try to, reaching out about the zero trust stuff, Ed, that you mentioned a little bit earlier. I really need to kind of expand my scope. I feel that right now, particularly with the way things we talked a little bit earlier about the state of things, the economy and other things like that. I need to kind of have a bigger landscape, other things that I can do for other people. So that's hugely important. That's a mature thing. It's not just because of our age, and we do have the battle scars, but anyone, right, can kind of mature very quickly in like today.
And
Good call.
Consider yourself lucky if your place of employ challenges you to do that and give you the opportunity. A lot of companies don't allow you to learn on their dime, right? You may learn on the customer's dime, but they're looking for that initiative. And it's I still think there's a disconnect of what's real and what you can get. Because when I see some of these job postings, they want a flying, two-headed winged unicorn to do all these things, right? And I'm trying to find myself a niche. I'm finding now and say, hey, I want to start doing these things. DevOps is not that thing, but I'm looking at transforming my skill set here pretty soon.
I mean, we have to realize that we're living in a lucky time where if you think about 15 years ago, if you're like, hey, I want to learn about, fault tolerance with SQL Server, and everything, how much would that cost for you to set up your own lab to do that and buying software and everything else? Think about how much free education you have available to you, number one. Then number two, you just spin it up in Azure, you see how it works. If it works, doesn't work, you fail, whatever, no big deal. And then you just delete it, delete the resource group, and you're on your way. So, there's so many barriers that, are no longer there. So it's just up to you to make it happen.
Yeah, I was lucky that I've always had a lab because I worked for resellers, hardware resellers and VARs. So I was always taking the scraps that were returned off lease, a little bit old, and I've always had a lab, right? It might have been some raggedy workstations and everything else, but you got to have something to test your kung fu on, right?
Right. Drew, would you agree? You've got I'm sure, a robust lab or a sandbox that you use regularly?
Oh, I can build out everything. And the other thing that I would say is if you're trying to figure out what's next, figure out what the business is doing and figure out what's going to make them the most money. And so I said, 2 years ago, the other reason why I started getting into container security is I started realizing that companies would save a ton of money by moving off of traditional IaaS servers and moving to PaaS-based resources. So like if you kind of look from a security standpoint where the business is going, you can jump on it early. But the reason that I also love the whole idea of DevSecOps, and you'll hear things in the industry called shift left, is, traditionally it's always been the operations team, or the developers and the operations team push something, and then security comes in at the end. It's a very expensive way to do that. Like if you look at most statistics out there say an application that gets caught at the very end, like via vulnerability, is a $4 million issue, but it costs like $70 or something to catch it at the time of the origination. So if you're kind of looking at it also from the lens, where is the business going and where are they gonna move their technology focus on, basically to make more money, because at the end of the day, that's the business's job, is to make money. That could also help you to understand. Yeah. But what I was saying about the DevSecOps is I also do love the fact that the security team is now right there at the beginning. So we're talking about things like threat modeling. So like if you're building a new application, what threats are going to be there for that application? Is it going to have a database? So would SQL injection be available? So we're getting ahead of it. So we're not the people at the very end that have to say approve or deny. We're helping the business also be more innovative and faster to market.
Love it. Go figure, Drew. Be proactive, not reactive, right? Build security in from the get-go. Just makes sense. Good call out.
I'll tell you another trend that I follow is look at companies that you don't think traditionally invest in technology and security. And if you see people that were a company or industries that were trailing, all of a sudden they are huge investors into the time and the money. That's a good place to do it. In regards to containers, I'll tell you the company that they spend a lot of money on it, H&R Block, because that's what they do during the tax season. Right, they spin up the workloads to be able to do their stuff online, but you don't need it. The same type of workload you have from January to what's tax day, April 15th or something.
I don't know, or retail, right? Same thing. Q4, right, ramping up to the holiday season, and then womp right down. Yeah, good call, Edward.
Yeah, I watch trends of non-traditional technology consumers to say if they're spending money on it, it must be important.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a customer about that today, about if you look at all of these different industries, they have their time that they're super busy. But I also like it because if you look at it from a cloud perspective, I think we're kind of helping society as a whole, because if it wasn't for the cloud, places like H&R Block would have to run for that 100% usage year round. How much money are they wasting running those servers and stuff like that year round? That's a ton of electricity. But with the cloud and containers, you can shift it. So, retailers can have these pods during their busy season. They go down, tax season gets up, and then maybe EDU during the summer when all the students are out, they scale down. So the whole scalability piece of it is phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's across all clouds. Azure, AWS, GCP, and I would commend all three of the major players that they understood the limited thought processes of legacy people, because for a while they were resistant for allowing you to do auto shutdowns and everything in the old IaaS model. But now you can schedule graceful shutdowns to be able to bring service up if you want to can use a traditional VM and have times and stuff. But the containers is the thing to go. I should bump my head against the wall. Big shout out to Thomas Patterson, who told me this was going to be a big thing 10 years ago. He was a Docker guy, and he said, this is going to be the thing, Ed. And I'm like, man, everybody's studying VMware and all this other stuff. He said, no. And then he came over to Microsoft, and he's a cloud evangelist, but he called it. This is going to be the new thing, density, and being able to do microservices. So cool. Say, hey, I know that we're over. I really appreciate you, Drew, for taking time. I know you got a lot of stuff going on in the background, but let me ask you a question. Out of the M365 security stack, what's your favorite workload?
So mine is actually the Defender for Cloud Apps. I love the EDR solution. Yeah, I love what was formerly called MCAS. Like the ability to do so. Where I saw so much value, especially 2 years ago, was what's called session control with a reverse proxy. So I can say, if you think about it, you might have vendors or something that need access to data, but you don't want them. They're not going to be coming from your managed device, but they still need to be able to get to it. Or you have employees that aren't running from their managed device. You can create basically that containerized version, allow them to, read, write, pay, whatever, but just not download. So you can block downloads on unmanaged devices, and you get so granular doing things like if it's confidential data, block the download and block copy and cut. But then you have the whole threat protection side too, like looking at things like multiple mass downloads. And so for me, I've always said loosely that a CASB is basically like a firewall for the cloud. And so it is absolutely a necessity. And it's one of those areas that I still see not all customers are running CASBs.
Yeah. It's crazy. Good culture. But
that's what I cut my tip. Obviously, I have an affinity for that product because that sort of got me started in the 365 security stuff. Actually, that's not true. ATA was the first thing, then MCAS, then this way. See that? I tell you what, I actually like my co-host, and I don't like a lot of people. But you're all right, Brody. Careful ahead and all.
You too,
Drew,
buddy.
any parting words and advice that you would give someone? It can be on anything. Adopt this technology, learn this skill set, attend this thing. If you got to give somebody two things to say, hey, if you want to stay in security technology, you should consider these two things. And you can't use CI/CD. Everybody know that. Everybody knows that's your passion right now.
So, I would say for the thing that I'll always tell customers. So I'm going to do two. I'm going to say the number one thing that I've always tell customers is to make sure you're doing the basics. Because I would say from the incident response side, I would have customers that were worried about the most random 0 days, and 0 days are terrible. But to be fair, if you're an adversary, you only get to use a 0 day once. Why would I waste it if you don't have MFA on your VPN? If I can just log in as the user, why would I waste a 0 day? So do the fundamental things, MFA for all external identities, updating your services. But for individuals, I would say my biggest piece of advice is just understand the landscape and make sure that you're just, for sellers, for example, make sure you're doing right by the customer, because at the end of the day, they have a limited budget. They have a lot to secure. How are we making sure that we're actually helping them meet a need? And figuring out meeting people where they're at. Yeah, I guess hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
it does.
I'm trying to transform what I'm doing in role to go along with what you're saying. I'm tired of selling feature sets and capability. I want to really understand what the customer is trying to achieve, and then let's map the technology to the business case or the risk case, rather than just say buy it and then figure out how to use it. Right.
It's got to come from the top down, Edward. Yeah, good call.
I want to hear exactly what you're trying to achieve. Don't make it technical, Mr. Customer. Just tell me, what you want to do, and then let's figure out is what you want to do relevant, possible. And then the other thing, like you said, Drew, you got to factor this in. Is it affordable, right? And if you can't afford it, whether that be people, technology, time sink, OpEx, CapEx, I want to do that, because I'm seeing, in addition to having raw technical skills and acumen and just being really good, I'm seeing a resurgence of customers looking for people who have industry experience and can advise. What have you seen before? What is someone else doing? If you were in my seat, what would you do? I had a customer ask me that. If you were in my seat, Edward, what would you do? How would you approach this? And I could hear the seller on the other line grimace, because he knew I was about to tell the truth. I was like, well, don't, I wouldn't spend my money on this. I spend my money on this. And the seller, he wanted to read me the riot act, but he knew better.
You know what, Edward? You're building trust. You're a trusted advisor. And Drew called it out earlier. He's like, I don't want to necessarily replace things, but if I see an obvious hole, like Casby just called out, like, let's fill that, right? And it's like, there's competitors, but you got to do right by the customer. So you're killing it, Edward, and you too, Drew. All of these points.
And I told all my sellers, do not have displacement conversation, have augmentative conversation, because if you go in and you're just blindly talking about displacement, you don't know the room. You don't know if you got a fan there, because to me, if I'm a CISO and you tell me, oh God, you spent money on that, you just called me stupid. So I tell you what, you get you and your product and you get out of here, right? I'll keep my own way. So, but Drew, I learned so much from you, man. You helped me out a bunch of times. I feel good sometimes because you ask me a question, I very rarely can find an answer for you. But you're one of those folks. You're another Matt Soseman, and that is a compliment.
Big compliment.
You're another Matt Soseman.
Thank y'all so much, Edward. The words just mean a ton. And guys, thank y'all so much for having me. And I hope y'all have an awesome day.
Enjoy your time off. I'll see you when you get back. Later.
All right, Edward. I think we're up against time here. So for everybody that has not joined our Discord and needs gardening advice, don't forget to join our Discord.
And any of our listeners, I posted something that was sort of garbage in the Discord because they couldn't maintain the hyperlinks, but it'll give you an idea to go look. That post I put in the Discord up under the podcast live chat is talking about the M365 Security Private Community Program, and that is a list of upcoming things that they have. If you are, even if you're not a customer and you got a lab, you need to reach out and enroll your lab into the private preview, because some of the things they're talking about is 365 Defender products, and the survey you can give us. You can give a survey and win swag. They're talking about Linux kernel model options. The thing I thought most interesting that's coming up soon is app discovery from Mac OS private preview relaunch. So they tried it. Now they're going to try to do it again. They also had something called MDA private preview. What is MDA?
Microsoft Defender for Access.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Or for aphids.
For aphids.
Yes. I can't believe I missed that. Yeah. I don't know what MDA is.
Microsoft Defender for aphids. There you go. And then they have a new one that's coming out in July. It's July now. New information protection experience, an MDA. So it has to have something to do with S&C, it looks like. And then, and the thing here also, Microsoft Inspire is going to be virtual July 19th through the 20th. Black Hat is still on. I think we have somebody on the call that's going, maybe. Who's going to Black Hat? Who told me they were going to Black Hat?
One of my colleagues.
Okay, is that what it was? Gartner's having another one. They're having an identity and access management summit in Vegas, late August. And recently completed calls and private previews, MDO for eval mode. They got one that's MVP only, so Frank can't go.
That's cold. That's so cold.
And then we got, here's one that I saw today that I'm going to lab up in MDI. Direct response to compromised identities. You can create a account that can take activities in Active Directory.
Love it. Yeah, a separate account from the account you're currently using.
Yeah.
Everybody out there who has MDI deployed, you need to build another service account to perform the actions. But yeah, a very important feature, Edward. Good call.
Yeah, I'm gonna test it out to see, because all the other way you had to write a Power Automate, a Logic app, or PowerShell script to respond between something that was between your cloud and AD. But in MDI, and there's another feature that showed up in MDI. I was playing around with today, but I'll come back on the show and tell everybody about it when we have our next show. But
speaking of Matt Sosman, he released his first video in a while today, and it is about utilizing Power Platform with Defender for 365 to essentially create playbooks for MCAS. And
a new Matt Sosman video, awesome.
Yeah, he's still on his 90 days of using M365. I'm sorry, Windows 365 on a Mac. So he's doing that and said that he's going to write a report on his experience. It was either 30 days or 90 days of only using Windows 365 on a Mac. So I want to see it because I got a new Mac over here. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. It makes a good doorstop. It looks like. Prop my door open. But hey, once again, a good podcast. We had to scramble a little bit. We got some dates messed up, but it's a good problem to have because we just got confirmation that the CXC team from Microsoft at the CAT team is coming on in August. They may want to do a 2-part series. So to all our listeners, thank you for your support. Please send us your questions, and let's keep it moving.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.